This video is about RAOB's Sodar, Lidar, and Radar Data Decoders module. This module primarily performs decoding of wind profiler soundings, which are generated by surface-based sensing equipment. This module currently contains decoders for wind profiles produced by the following companies: Detect, Leosphere, Mitsubishi, and RemTech. These wind profiles are produced by various technologies as listed here. Wind profilers can produce wind data up to 3 or 4 kilometers high, and there are two main advantages to these wind profilers. First is the ability to produce high-density wind data in the boundary layer, and produce these profiles every few minutes, thereby providing a near real-time view of the boundary layer winds. The second advantage is that many of these profilers can also detect the vertical wind component, thereby providing a three-dimensional view of the boundary layer winds. So let's see how RAOB displays these three wind components U, V, and W. First, we'll load a wind profiler file which contains 691 soundings over a 58-hour time period, which produced one wind profile every 5 minutes. So let's plot one of these profiles. Since this is a wind profiler sounding, there is no temperature or dew point profile, just the wind data. By zooming into the lower section of this wind profile, we can see how RAOB displays the vertical wind component, with red and blue colors. The red indicates upward motion, and the blue indicates downward motion. At the bottom of the profile is the vertical wind scale, which for this sounding ranges from -4 to +4 knots. Now let's take a look at RAOB's unique UVW wind profiler display option. To do this, we'll access the Diagram Options panel by right-clicking over the diagram and then selecting the Format tab. Here we see the UVW Wind Diagram Options section. With the Standard Diagram Only option, you will always see the typical sounding displays like the skew-T and tephogram diagrams. But when we select the UVW option, we see a new display format. First, we see that the plotted wind profile is now displayed on the left side of the screen. We also have a soundinggram style display of the three wind components U, V, and W. And if we again right-click the mouse over the diagram, we again see the Diagram Options panel. And this time we'll select the Hodograph tab, where we can turn on the Plot Hodograph option. As we take a closer look at the hodograph, we see that the graph is plotted with red and blue lines to indicate relative up and downward motions. Now we'll take a look at how the Soundigram module can display wind profiler data. First, we see a single panel soundigram with the three wind components U, V, and W plotted with three different colors. Next, we see a two-panel soundigram where the left panel shows wind speed in blue and wind direction in brown. Now we'll take a look at how the cross-section module can display wind profiler data. First, we'll load a time section of a wind profiler file, and this sectional covers a time period of about 90 minutes where the standard wind vectors are plotted. First, we'll overlay the vertical wind component analysis. Here we first see a region of blue downward motion with northeasterly winds. Then there's a region of red upward motion with many southerly oriented winds. Next, we'll overlay wind speed isoplats. Here we see a 20-knot easterly maximum within the upward wind region. And now we see a three-panel time height diagram of the same 90-minute sectional. Here we've separately analyzed for the W, U, and V wind components. For the last example, let's go back to the sounding diagram to see an example from a RAS profiler. It's important to note that RAS profilers can produce both wind and temperature profiles. However, the wind and temperature data are produced on separate data files. Here's a time series example of the temperature-only soundings. Here's the corresponding wind profiles for the same time period. And here's a merged sounding where the temperature and wind profiles for the same time were merged with RAOB standard merge module, which is accessed from this menu option. You can also automatically merge all temperature and wind profiles for the entire time series dataset with the optional advanced merge module as selected here. And that completes the Sodar, Lidar, and Radar Decoders module video. Thank you for watching.